let's start off with this question. So, what are some useful things that can be done with ELD data besides recording compliance with hours of service? For instance, are there ways to use data to increase revenue, track detention, maybe even for safety, detect fatigue, things like that? Why don't we start with you, Ken, and we'll have others chime in as well.
Okay, so absolutely is the answer. We have more data now, and you as owners of assets have more data than ever before. The data that comes off of these devices, so this is one of our ELD devices, can basically provide you with all the tools that you need to make yourself available to a very broad market through load matching technologies. You can get relevant loads sent directly to your phone. It's not a load board situation, it's actually using the data off your device along with your availability to send you the opportunity directly to your phone. So if you can run more loaded miles, you'll make more money. The other thing is now you have full control of the time and where it's spent. So if you need to bill a shipper for detention, you clearly have that information available to you, and it's validated and verified. So the technology can improve your margins. You just have to learn how to use it, and we're here to help you do that.
Okay. And Wade, can I get you to chime in there too? I know everybody has a unique platform, and you want to get the most out of it, but what are some ways that you can use ELD data?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm the old guy in the room and came out of retirement after building the largest time-dependent same-day delivery company in the country, as well as one of the largest total outsourced supply chain businesses. What we learned in there is that there's two things that matter in the business: people and data and information. And so we take a very basic approach to people, and first and foremost, getting drivers home, making them more efficient, letting customers know where things are and when to plan to, is a major benefit. But that is just the beginning. No one's in a race to be regulated. We looked at ELD, we invested in it to go way beyond that, from conditional-based maintenance. When does your filter need to be really done versus conditional versus interval? We'll be rolling that out towards the end of the year. All the way down to safety and alerting people at the point in time where activity needs to take place to avoid an event and downtime and costs. So we're quite excited. And of course, as alluded to earlier, having the information to the point of where you need it is critical. If you need more training, you know where you need more training and why. So we take a very business approach, very people orientation, and how we convert this data into a better home life and a better productive work life for people.
Okay, thank you. So next question, let's put the next question to Mike Ross at Samsara. It seems that a number of fleets are using the ELD mandate to explore the market and look at new technologies that have been developed. The ELD mandate, as evidenced by how many people are up here today, has created a very competitive market for mobile technologies. Do you think that ELDs have now become a commodity in the market? Or looking beyond compliance, what is the big draw for investing in mobile technology today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, Wade and I were just having this discussion before coming up to the panel about how many folks are in this space right now, right? And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is, we're all learning, right? Operators are learning how to use an ELD. Law enforcement is learning how to conduct roadside inspections and in-house audits using the ELD mandate. And as developers, we're learning how to build tools to support you in that process. And quite honestly, we're learning from each other as well. We spend a lot of time coming to events like this to go see how people are solving the problems that you're running into. And I think that helps make the industry better, which is great. And you've seen a lot of change between when the ELD mandate first launched in December of 2017 to the products that we have now, right? We've learned that managing your unassigned hours is absolutely key to your success in running a compliant program, right? So how do we provide better tools to allow you to do that? I do think that the ELD functionality itself will become commoditized over time, right? So anytime you have something that's federally regulated, there's not a whole lot of room that we have to differentiate ourselves here, right? We all have to implement the same functionality in the same way by mandate. So really it becomes, where do we add value on top of that, right? As Wade mentioned, we're pulling a tremendous amount of data from your operations in order to support ELD. How do we use that to help you plan better maintenance, help you have insight into your operations and make better decisions, keep your drivers safe? And quite honestly, one of the things that I'm most excited about in that space is using that data to coach drivers, right? So when you can integrate an ELD with an asset tracker to know where your assets are, your trailers are, how they're being utilized, integrate that with a camera, and understand when you have an incident in a truck, you know exactly what happened, right? You know how the accelerator was being used, when they came off of the accelerator to come onto the brake, where they were looking in the vehicle, prior to something happening. And you can sit down with that driver afterwards and debrief that event in detail, and then use it with the other drivers for training as well. And at the end of the day, that helps you run a more efficient operation, but even more importantly, it helps you keep that driver safe on the road moving forward. So I think there's a tremendous amount that we can do, and I'm very much excited to learn and watch how this industry develops so that we can obsess over giving you the best platform that we can.
Okay, so speaking of how data from ELDs can be used, let me ask you, is it Tapan? Yeah, Tapan, all right. Let me ask you, so a number of freight tracking companies, for instance, we just heard from Trucker Tools a minute ago, they can use data through integrations with ELD providers to track trucks and perhaps other reasons as well. So have you been contacted by third parties who want to use your ELD data, whether it's asset location, driver hours, in ways that might cause concern, or yeah, let's ask you that question.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, once the ELD is out in the market, everyone knows that all the vehicles on the road are now connected, and ELD is the closest, which is inside the cab. And I think personally, there's a more sense of responsibility should be there on the ELD companies to not invade the privacy of drivers. And this affects a lot for owner-operators and small fleets. Big companies have been doing this for a long time, like Qualcomm invented kind of pre-GPS. But for us, we have taken a really big stand on privacy, and we do not integrate with any third-party vendors. We want to give the control directly to the trucking companies. So we have an option where they can share the location and disable it from their phone, so that they have control in their hands. And the data can be misused in many ways as well. I'm not saying everyone does that, but it's very easy to use that data and kind of interpret in several ways. So I think ELD companies should have this responsibility of sharing the data and make sure we're doing it the right way.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask a question to Nick now from Fleet Complete, and maybe be thinking of a question because we have an opportunity after this. But Nick, the industry now is in the process of switching from the AOBRD specification to the ELD specification. Maybe perhaps some of the audience have already done it, so maybe that'd be enough to share some. But so from a technology standpoint, it should be pretty easy. Flip a switch and it's done, right? But what are the things that people need to know how to do to make that transition as seamless as possible?
Yeah, well, you can flip a switch in a system. That does not mean it's that easy for a driver to kind of learn, right? So, yeah, we're seeing the adoption of AOBRD to ELD more so in your larger fleets than we are in the smaller fleets right now. They kind of know, the smaller fleets understand that the mandate is coming up. They're going to have to switch. They're a little wary because of some of the changes that means for how they can use their logs and the data that they may be able to edit and that kind of stuff. A simple example of, hey, I was off duty and I was told I could I have to move my truck. I move it. That just kicked me into drive mode, right? So how do you handle those type of situations are going to be different from AOBRD to ELD. Well, what we tend to recommend to those type of fleets is to kind of have a champion within that organization. So a driver who can pick up those changes really easily to understand the differences with ELD, get them on board, and then they can start bringing on the other drivers within the fleet as well. We still have a couple months here. Utilize that time both for the advantages that AOBRD uses, but also to, probably in November, start moving to ELD so you can get some of those kinks out before the hard mandate comes back into effect on the 15th of December. So you really want to make sure you're not caught off guard. Flipping a switch on the 14th or the 13th or something like that is probably not the best way to get your drivers prepared for the mandate. And also, I would just do a check-in with any ELD provider or AOBRD provider that you have. Is the hardware you actually have in the vehicle sufficient for an ELD mandate? There's still hardware out there that only runs AOBRD based on the specifications of the hardware device itself. So I would just double check with your provider that device you have is ELD compliant. If not, use this time to get that swapped out. But then train your drivers so they understand the differences, so they're ready to hit the road.
Speaking of the transition, one thing that would help, I would imagine, would be to present information to drivers in a very clear way. And so maybe Ken from Konexial, what are you seeing as far as demand to like embed ELD functions in a single user interface? Like get your ELD get your ELD app, your driver workflow, your messaging, everything in one app, so the driver's not going through multiple apps to manage his workday.
Well, that's a great question. We know that as consumers, we all know it's very frustrating when you're being asked to download an app for every single task you need to do. So we believe that the companies that are going to be the most successful are those that put design and user experience at the top of the list. And that goes from hardware design. So if you have a device that has a 4.5-foot cable and a box on it, you need to look around because there are new devices that are available that are completely invisible in the cab. But from a software standpoint, you should have the expectation that there's one home screen that does everything you need to do. That home screen should allow you to manage your ELD, to manage your time, to capture all the documents you need to do, to get truck-specific turn-by-turn directions, to find all your points of interest. You should have very high expectations for an excellent design piece of software. So I would encourage you guys to look at all the solutions out there, compare and contrast them, and then make a decision for yourself. What is it? Because this is a very personal thing for drivers, right? What are you going to be interacting with all day long? And do I want to be flipping around to 18 different apps, or would I like to get all the information I need from one well-designed application? So I think those options are out there.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And Mike from Samsara, I want to kind of ask you the similar question, maybe with this twist. So in the event of an accident or an incident, I would imagine it would be helpful to have all that data synchronized in one place. I know you probably have a camera system, but when you can take the event recorder with the ELD data and other information and have it all available in one database, how helpful is that? And should that be a pretty serious consideration for companies when they're looking at ELDs?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest value propositions that we've seen our customers cue in on is the ability to exonerate their drivers, right? So when something happens, having all of that information in one place that they can literally send to the driver at the roadside to be able to show to law enforcement. We've had more incidents than I can count where we've had this happen, and we've been able to immediately display what happened and have a factual record that's admissible in legal proceedings to help set the record straight, and where you can avoid drawing yourself into legal proceedings to resolve an incident like that. You're saving yourself time and obviously cost as well. So that's been tremendously helpful, and again, it comes back to the training aspect of it as well. I'd like to pivot just a little bit and talk about the ability to use kind of one app for things. I think in addition to just the functionality of having documents and routing and turn-by-turn direction and ELD in one space, one of the things that we've seen a lot of demand for from our users is the ability to customize their workflow, right? So, each of us runs a slightly different business. Each of us has slightly different things that we're optimizing for. But the ability to, build a sequence of events that, says, hey, I'm going to log in the morning. Maybe the first thing that I want to be presented with is a DVIR, and then I want to be able to get on the road, and then I want to be able to go, deliver my load and fill out the documentation. Each one of us approaches that in a slightly different way. But if we can guide our drivers through that and make it easy for them to submit the information, capture the information that they need, that gives us better information in our back offices. It helps us process things faster, and it helps the speed of our business actually increase in velocity. So that's one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about is how do we do that, and how do we do it for each and every one of you, realizing that you all have slightly different needs in a way that's flexible and can help you move forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good question. Do you want to get her a mic, anybody? I can hear you, but let me see. Does anybody have a microphone you can give her?
Just step to the front.
Well, I mean,
Just step to the front so we can hear you.
I was kind of wondering, in building this technology for our industry, and you talk about documents that the driver needs, have y'all thought on the process of permits in your technology and having the motor carrier have a control over those? And we just think about a digital insurance card and setting up the expiration date to expire in the preloading, in addition to the lease agreements and any state permitting that you would need. So I would like y'all to talk a little bit about that. And I had one other question. When you go into the driver's perspective and what's friendly for them, in any of your apps, have you built in like that pre-notification to the driver of when you're going to be doing maintenance? So on the motor carrier side, we can receive those, you're gonna have a degrade of service during this time and this time. There seems to be a gap from the driver's perspective in his cab of when that degrade of service is going to take place. And so that can really catch him off guard. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, are we looking into building some catch-alls for that as well?
That was a great question. We're going to award you a tablet for.
So
you might want to stay here in case you need to repeat anything.
yeah,
Sure.
so let me address your question about notification of performance. And I think what you're referring to is back-end support or server support. You should have an expectation of your technology provider that those systems work 24/7 without any degradation.
Right.
There's no excuse for not having a system that works without cell coverage. The server should perform all the time because the cloud technology allows you to have redundancy and capability. So I can't see a situation where your provider should have any kind of outage. If they do, you might want to talk to them about that. Your question about permits and documentation, so yes, the best designed apps do have capability to capture all that documentation and put it in a workflow process so the driver has everything he needs.
Just to add to that, and I think the key is when you look at your providers and ask them the question about uptime and what they're doing to manage that. I think all of us up here have 999 as a goal, right? Notwithstanding that at 4 this morning we got a phone call that Verizon got a fiber wire clipped,
Yeah.
right? But the uptime is there. The bigger question you asked is really key because we talk about workflow, we talk about maintenance, but it's really about the digitization of the driver and the truck. They should have all their stuff available electronically and for the most part managed by someone in the back office to make sure that he's organized and knows where things are. So I think we're all working in that direction. So
just leading on to that, when you're pushing new firmware out and currently most of us are 3G, 4G, and we talk about the 5G coming on board and what that platform would look like and in that conveying to that tractor and more data and more visibility and a faster stream, right? So a lot of our drivers, the feedback we get from our motor carrier is they are lack of information to the driver. We're gathering it all, but nothing's being shared back. So what apps are y'all building in for an owner-operator to grab maybe additional service maintenance on his tractor, pulling from the engines and some diagnostics for the owner-operator too?
So yeah, maybe I can add a little bit. So we provide notifications for the documents, specifically for insurance expiration, CDL expiration, and vehicle registration renewal. And we are also adding notifications for vehicle maintenance. So you driver as well as the admin, we also provide an app for the owner, motor carrier. They get notifications right in their motor carrier app as well as the driver gets the notification. So yes, they'll get a notification 30-day in advance, 60-day in advance that
So
you need to renew the registration.
one thing you need to ask about is what types of engine diagnostic codes and decoding you're going to get, because all hardware is not the same, and you need to pick a provider that actually has OEM level code support and or has reverse engineered it.
I think everyone up here is going to have all that.
Yeah.
Yes, we have that in our product.
So,
we Yeah, I mean, for us, we found that a lot of owner operators, especially when the mandate first came into effect in 2017, just said, hey, make me compliant. That's all I care about. And now they're seeing that other data is really valuable for them. If I can prevent a shutdown of my truck, we're talking about, revenue. Like if my truck's not on the road, I'm not making any money, right? So now they're starting to think, okay, now that I have the ELD or the log part under my belt, what else can I do with this? And that's where we're seeing the ECM data being a big selling point for owner operators.
we all compete a little bit differently down the same path, but there's a number of initiatives, for example, that we have that are tools that will end data mining and, in essence, artificial intelligence tools to inform the driver what's really happening. In addition to that, we had one major field service service company induct 22,000 pieces of his customers' equipment, and he's alerting them when things need to happen proactively. So there's a lot of stuff proactively that's happening that's not quite there yet versus the reactive everything from the driver, right? And we're all, if there's a message here, it's all about the driver, right?
Thanks for your question.
Can I put one last cap on that?
Go ahead.
So I think we spend a lot of time talking about ELD compliance and hours of service specifically, right? But that's one aspect of compliance in your program that you're managing, right? So we talk a little bit about driver qualification files and keeping track of that other data. I think, as we can continue to expand our platforms to manage compliance holistically for your organization, that's really some of the power that we get from, starting with an ELD baseline, but expanding it so that when you have an in-house audit, everything is in one platform. It's all organized. The inspector comes in, and it's there and it's easy, right? And that removes so much burden from that process for you.
Of course, that builds onto company policies and other regulatory policies that just fold right into that system.
All right, we had I think I saw your question first. Let's go with this question, then we'll move into a different area. So can you come up and ask this?
Morning, thank you. As a driver, one of the things that we see from brokers is every broker out there has their own tracking app, right? And you have to download, probably delete, re-download all the time. Is there anything as an industry you can do to put out a standard such that brokers can collectively, all see the data for tracking so that we don't have to go through that all the time?
From our perspective, and I'll let other people add, but the key here is to be able to have the APIs to take in whatever is being used out there. But there's been a number of fronts to standardize. It just has never gone very far. Hopefully this blockchain type stuff will raise that standardization out there. But the key is to make sure that you as a driver get what you need in whatever form it's delivered on your system, not theirs.
So
So-
there's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
What I was going to say is the carrier owns the data. It doesn't belong to an ELD company. It doesn't belong to a broker. It belongs to you, okay? You should have the expectation that your data and your privacy is guarded. I'm not going to name companies, but you need to know who owns the provider that you have, and you need to ask them the question, what are you doing with my data, and are you using my data or selling my data to anyone that I've not authorized? And if the answer to that is yes, I would suggest that you look for someone who will protect your privacy.
Run hard.
To directly answer your question, there are a number of initiatives, as mentioned, that are looking to standardize the way in which we store ELD-related data, right? And this is for two reasons. One, it allows that interchange between load boards and various systems to be a little bit more standardized with our APIs. Each of us has, a digital format in which we exchange information with other systems, but they're all slightly different, right? The other reason, and we see this with a lot of our enterprise fleets, is that they want some guarantee that if, heaven forbid, any one of us consolidates or decides to take our business in a different direction, that they can get the data out of that platform and use it, just as you wouldn't necessarily buy an entire fleet of Kenworth over Peterbilt, right? You have probably a mix of OEMs in your fleet, so that if there's a recall in one make model, you're not out of business, right? So I think over the course of the next year, maybe year and a half, we'll see those standards come into fruition, and then it's incumbent upon us to be able to conform with them and provide that standardization in the industry.
And to add to my previous answer as well, so the biggest problem in standardization is the same thing you have seen with Facebook. So you will authorize a location sharing once, but then it comes to third party. So broker will say, okay, I want to access the location for this driver, and they can directly access. So the authorization does not come back to you as a driver each and every time someone requests for it. And that's the biggest problem of centralizing it. And I think it's important that each and every authorization comes to you as a driver.
So thank you. Let's. I think we touched on this question a little bit, but let me first ask you, Nick, and then maybe if there's anyone else who has something to add, go ahead. But so the ELD mandate, it gives carriers and drivers 8 days to fix a defective log, electronic log. So basically, you have to log on paper until you get it fixed. But when you're out in there in the field and running, nationwide, you can't just go stop into a service center and get your ELD fixed. So I can see this being a potentially difficult challenge to get an error fixed on an ELD within that time frame. So anyway, Nick, what are some things that maybe some processes you have and that you've seen out there that can get a defective ELD fixed quickly, and so that drivers don't have to worry about that, using paper logs and getting a violation?
Yeah. From talking to carriers, it's a big question that they have. It's a risk that they take of knowing whether their provider is going to be able to meet the mandate of getting them a new device. So the onus, first of all, is on us to provide hardware that does not fail, right? So we want to make sure our hardware is one that's going to last and can stand up to the rigors that the trucking industry goes through, that you won't have to worry about it. Now, there may be things we do of new software downloads or something over the air, but if we actually have to replace a unit, then we have to make sure that we have multiple distribution centers, that we can overnight it anywhere that anywhere in the US or Canada that you may be, so that we can drop ship it to a truck station or something like that, or a hotel or a distribution center that you have. We have to make sure we have that. So I would have, if that's a concern, check with the carrier or the ELD provider you guys are using. Do they have multiple distribution centers? Are they able to overnight anywhere in US quickly? And what's the deadline of a day to do that? Because you don't want to be out of business for long or have to run paper logs for too long. I think, there's two things we're kind of all harping on up here is, ease for the driver, but then, know the type of ELD provider that you're using and ask these sort of questions ahead of time.
To add to Nick's comment about the reliability of hardware, though, it's really important that you talk to your provider about what type of service you're actually going to get. Are they going to answer the phone? What type of policies do they have? And I would encourage everybody here that's shopping for providers, you need to be reading the reviews, for example, on ELDratings.com. That's an independent review site. Okay, we're all being reviewed on that site, but pay particular attention to what the users and the drivers say. you'll learn a lot if you'll just do your homework. But service is an incredibly important part of this business. Who are you going to get on the phone, and do they answer the call?
I'd take it one step further. All of us have public support lines. And like if you're in the market, like I would highly recommend picking up the phone and calling each one of us and timing how long it takes us to pick up the phone. That ability to be in El Paso at 3 a.m. and to be able to get somebody on the phone that can help you is critically important.
I think one of the biggest changes in the industry in the last 10 years is really the focus on ruggedness and reliability together with support. It's a major change to where we are today, and it should be one-touch support, and it should be real time. So, and it's changing fast, but hardware does matter, and the company's support does matter, and its capability to deliver on that support is really critical.
So this next question, I'll ask you, Tapan, but for many of you probably attended the FMCSA listening session, and you probably read the news that a new hours of service rule is being proposed. And one of the changes would be that to add a new split sleeper berth option. Right now there's the 8-2 split, but they're considering adding a 7-3 split. And I've read about this before, and I still don't, if I was a driver, I don't know if I'd even know how to use it. So I'm wondering if is there a feature in your software that can make this easy for drivers to understand how to use that split and see and help them plan their routes? Because it's confusing to me.
It is confusing to everyone, I guess. 8+2 has been always a very confusing proposition, and there are very few use cases you can really use it. We try to do that by providing the information and explanation in various different languages for the driver so that they can really understand 8+2. We have been doing it for 8+2, and similar thing applied to 7+3 now. I think it's useful when you have a pickup which is early in the morning and you reach at a closer stop at night. So then you can take a 7-hour break over there and drive early in the morning and go do your pickup or unloading. That's the best kind of use case we found for a split. Another interesting rule proposal is for 3 hours break.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting, because now a driver could potentially, if he's being detained at a shipper, not just use his break and not have to have that just subtract from his 14-hour clock. But I'm wondering, does anybody have any opinion on that? Would that be good for the industry, or because right now there's more pressure on shippers to get drivers out of their shipping facilities, but if now drivers are allowed to take a break and not have that impact their hours, would it?
So I believe that this is a key issue that people need to make their voice heard on. Drivers need flexibility, but if that flexibility is at the cost of being coerced into taking a 3-hour break because a shipper is slow, we believe drivers should be paid for their time, period. And one thing the 14-hour day actually does is it values everyone's time equally. We all have the same number of minutes in the day, we all have the same number of hours that we can drive, and we all have the same limits. So I would encourage each of you to think and make your voice heard on whether you think it's a good idea to have an extension that can be added to the 14-hour clock, because the reality is most drivers will not get paid for that time. So while you have a limit that everyone is using, everyone is being compensated the same, and everyone's time is being valued the same. So I would just encourage everybody to think through that and make your voice heard to the FMCSA.
So, sorry. Just wanted to clarify, so 7+3 split rule is different than 3-hour break rule. Just wanted to clarify that 7+3 already existed as 8+2. It has been extended for 7+3. It does not pause your clock, the 3-hour in that, but you can split your 10-hour break in 7 and 3. So, but I do agree with others over here in the panel that there should be some way to regulate the warehouse and the docks so that this provision is not exploited by the shippers. Rather, I know FMCSA is trying to do great things here and trying to be flexible with the drivers and hours of service, and I mean, I personally really appreciate, and I'm sure panels over here appreciate that as well. I think we just have to figure out how it goes.
One of the things that I've been impressed with, we spend a lot of time with the FMCSA, and they really want feedback from the public, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons that we all live in this country, is that rules that govern us, we have a voice in that process. So if you haven't been participating in the listening sessions, if you haven't been part of the public discourse that surrounds the open issues that are in front of us right now, please work together, work with your respective associations or as an individual, and contribute to that discussion, right? Because these rule sets are going to affect all of us, from our end on implementing them for you, from your end on being able to work within them, and they're being built for our collective good here. So it's incumbent upon all of us. I consider it just like voting, right? To get out and make sure that we're influencing that process and getting what we need to be able to run our businesses most efficiently and safely.
Okay. Another interesting portion of the ELD rule is that now any edits made to the logbook of a driver has to go to the driver for final approval. I know, talking with fleets, they would make all sorts of edits before with AOBRDs, and drivers didn't have to approve them. But now that the driver has to approve them, let me ask this to Mike, if you would. Do you see, is there a workflow that can help drivers understand why a fleet made an edit, or to make that process so it's smooth, so it doesn't become a sticky point with drivers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is interesting. As you read through the ELD mandate, you realize the thought and intention that has gone into protecting the relationship between the driver and their back office. And so in requiring the drivers accept carrier edits, we're ensuring that we're clearly communicating between those two entities, right? So I think for each of us, there's a certain level of functionality that we're mandated to have, but then it's a question of how do we facilitate that back and forth. So one of the things that we learned very quickly is that, one, from the back office and fleet management perspective, understanding which edits have been proposed, which edits are pending acceptance by a driver, which edits have been accepted by a driver, and which edits have been rejected, having the ability to manage that process and just keep track of who's who in the zoo is challenging, right? So your expectation should be that we are providing you the tools to very clearly understand where each of those edits is in the process. And the other piece that I'll layer on top of that is it's a communication back and forth, right? As a carrier is making an edit, maybe they make an invalid assumption about what they're trying to change on that driver's log. The driver needs to be able to directly comment back to the carrier and say, hey, it's 1 hour in this status device, an hour and a half, right? Or here are the explicit times. So having messaging and that communication pathway embedded in this process so that conversation can take place within the platform is incredibly important as well. So it's really just all about remaining organized in communicating with your workforce and back and forth between the fleet management organization that's maintaining the logs and the drivers that are ultimately responsible for them.
We totally agree with everything there that was just said, but there's some complex industries where we've worked with the FMCSA to categorize, allow easier adoption by the driver, and there's been resistance to this date, but that's one area that a lot of work could be done to make life a lot easier for the driver and the fleet. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add on how important the communication piece of it is. Annotate the logs of why that duty status was there, why it was edited, communicate with your driver about why you think that's them, so they can communicate back, have that audit trail. That's going to be the key piece here. So,
another area we should touch on is with ELDs. ELDs add more options for drivers to transfer their log data to roadside officers. They can transmit it wirelessly. They can transmit it through a USB drive. They can print off a log. They can show them the tablet with the logs on them. But I was just wondering, have you got any feedback from your customers? Is there confusion out there in the market? I know I talked to one fleet who had a driver, I think it was in Wyoming, who printed off a log and gave it to the officer. He said, no, that's not allowed.
So the rules are very clear.
Yeah.
There are only 4 methods that are supported and approved by the ELD rule. There are 2 at Roadside, and there are 2 that are called telematic methods, okay? At Roadside, the only acceptable method is a Bluetooth transfer or a USB transfer, so physically connecting something. Well, that's a problem when 40% of the drivers have iPhones, because iPhones don't have USB, okay? So now you're left with telematic options. There are two telematic options. They work very similarly. One is you can send an encrypted email to the FMCSA and get a response, or two, you can send a SOAP transaction, which is a web services transaction, from your device to the FMCSA and back. So it will vary by provider, but the strong reliability in the system is to send it via the telematics means. We don't think roadside transfer works very well, and the officers don't like it. But the other last comment I'll make is showing somebody your display, that is only a backup method. Showing them a PDF, that's a backup method. Showing them a printout, it's a backup method. It is not an approved method to transmit the data.
We are experiencing some inconsistencies across the country in terms of officers and how far and deep they can go. The feedback from our customers has been consistent, which is keep the data to only that's necessary and don't have it on a device that has a lot of other stuff that shouldn't be looked at.
Yeah, I think as we saw the ELD mandate go into effect, we're all learning as drivers, as industry providers, and as law enforcement. Everyone's trying to figure out how to correctly interact in this space. And so we're willing to provide a little bit of leniency, obviously, to our law enforcement partners, but at the same time, we also need to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what the expectation is when somebody goes through a roadside inspection. And I think while there were a number of kinks in that process, both on the wireless web transfer side, on the FMCSA's end of the spectrum, and in the way different organizations were enforcing the mandate, a lot of that has been worked out now, right? We've had plenty of time to go through and have several iterations here, and we're seeing a lot more standardization in how roadside inspections are being conducted, and a lot better performance and standardization in how those data files are being transferred to the FMCSA.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add is while there are approved methods and backup methods, there's quite still a variety of what the education that the roadside inspector themselves have about the mandate and how to receive the logs and all that. So the experience may vary significantly where you are and which inspector you get that day, and how they want to receive that data. We see many times of carriers who get fined for a reason that is not valid given how the ELD mandate's written, and so they give us a call. We work with them to prove that that they are in compliance and get that ticket waived. So work with your ELD provider in those situations, because the education level of the roadside inspectors is not 100% yet.
Let me ask just a quick tally. How many of you guys have training programs for your drivers under the process when they get stopped and inspected? I would do that. Most drivers, it's different.
So one last comment on this subject of raising the knowledge of the people enforcing the rules. It's very important that you teach your drivers to be respectful of the officers, and I know a lot of you do that, but also being nice goes a long way, okay? But it's a good idea that you know what those 4 approved methods are in the federal mandate, because some of these inspectors don't know. Okay, they're trying to figure it out, and if you can respectfully and nicely tell them, hey, this is what the rule actually says, that may help you, but being nice goes a long way.
Yeah, so our experience is similar to others as well over here. And I think AOBRD has added extra confusion for the officer, not just for the drivers. And I hope I am not true over here, but I think after December, officers would know that the only way is to get the ELD data in my computer, and if that doesn't work, you might get a citation, and they may not know an option for a backup plan wherein you can just show the phone if the transfer does not work. So I hope I'm wrong here, but the backup option is important and drivers should be educated about it. And another confusion for the data transfer is FMCSA has said there are 2, which is encrypted email, to what Kevin was saying, and the SOAP transfer. For the end user or driver, I think you should just consider a button where you click and the data goes to the FMCSA's computer. If it does not show up, it doesn't matter email or web. It's just one way, just one button, it goes there. If it does not, then just show the logs to the officer and hope he accepts it.
Well, I have, excuse me, I have one more topic I want to, or question I want to ask, and then we'll let each of our panelists give a closing statement or closing argument if this was a court case. But anyway, so with ELDs, drive time cannot be edited. I think we all know that. But so it's really important to get things recorded right the first time, since you can't change them later, especially as it pertains to yard moves. So is there any, have you seen any demand, or have you created any features that would help prompt a driver, like when he arrives at a customer, say, hey, this is a yard move, don't forget to record it, or any other type of process that could make sure that anything that needs to be done right now is done right now and not put off till later? Anybody want to answer that?
I'll take a first stab. So the rules are very specific. You're not allowed to change status for a driver. There's only one automatic change that's allowed, and it's if he has not had velocity for 5 minutes, you can prompt him. If he doesn't answer, then you can move him to on-duty status. So there are different usability things we can do to do some geofencing and send you a push notification, but the application itself cannot make that change. The one thing that I would encourage everybody, a big change from AOBRD to ELD, is it is really important that before you move that vehicle, you have your status set or your exception set.
Okay.
If you're going to use personal conveyance or yard moves, it has to be turned on before the vehicle moves.
Okay.
After the vehicle moves, you've already started your clock. There is no erasing that. You can annotate it, but you can't erase it.
Okay.
We have tried with some of the largest companies in the world to come up with easier ways for yard moves. You've been there. And the FMCSA is just not ready to talk about some ways that could be done, which could be done with telematics and the tools. But they're just not ready yet.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. We're in the same boat. There are some very basic things that we can do based on the technology that we have, and I think there's a gap between what the FMCSA envisioned when they wrote the ELD mandate and what we can do from a technical perspective now with the precision of GPS and the location that we have. So I think this is another area that we'll see the ELD mandate evolve over time to be able to do some sensible things here that at the end of the day allow you to operate most efficiently and to the limits of the mandate, right? If we can tell that a vehicle is moving entirely within a yard, it makes sense to me that we should be able to classify that as a yard move without somebody having to discreetly declare it. But we've got to work through the regulatory process to make sure that that's a common understanding amongst folks.
Okay. Well, thank
Yep.
you. Oh, do you have something?
Well,
Okay.
yard move is just the beginning. Personal conveyance is another
Yeah.
big topic. And I think yesterday also Joseph was trying to clarify from FMCSA how it can be used. But yeah, as long as you think that you're really using it for personal, you should put it in personal conveyance. At least they are flexible now, accepting that. So.
Okay. Well, cool. So just with the few minutes we have left, we'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to give some parting words of wisdom. And with that, if there's any questions you didn't get to ask, I'm sure you can ask them individually afterwards. So with that, Nick, I'll let you and just go down this way.
Great, thank you. So, we as Fleet Complete and BigRoad are excited to be here at GATS and working with all of you carriers and other providers to not only provide a better experience for drivers, but also to provide safety on the road. So we are excited for the safety aspects that our platform has to offer, the OEM partnerships that don't even require a black box when you're talking about some non-ELD solutions that we have, and the ECM data that we have within our platform. The ability to track your drivers, your vehicles, your assets, get temperature monitoring, all within a single platform that can work globally is really important. And it's something that we strive really hard to provide at Fleet Complete. And as we continue to grow globally and your operations continue to grow, you know that you have a partner behind you that has experience, 20 years in the industry of doing this. So we're not new. We've done this for quite a while, and we have the backbone to support it.
Well, first of all, thank you for everybody that came. You guys have been very helpful for us as asking questions, and we're here to serve you. What I would tell you is a couple of things. Design matters, okay? What are you dealing with? Are you eliminating points of failure? Is it high quality? Service matters. Data privacy matters. All of those things should be important to your ELD provider if they're trying to help you improve your life and increase your margins. What other services can they provide you? That's an important question you need to ask them as well. Can they help you with fuel management? Can they give you a fuel discount? Can they help you find the loads that you need? All of those things can work to your benefit to increase your margins, and you should have very high expectations of quality and design. So thank you for being such a great audience. Appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you, and we're just proud to be here. And I'm proud to be in this industry, and I think we all see the possibility of technology to help you guys. It's just so critical. All of the technical considerations are real. Pay attention to hardware. Pay attention to reliability. Pay attention to what companies are doing down the road, not just today. But pay attention to your business, because, as my wife would say, in the trucking business, in the logistics business, you know, a happy driver is a happy life, right? Happy people in the back office is happy people, right? It adds up. The little things matter long term. So we're excited to be here. We're excited to be part of the industry. Feel free to stop by. We have some of our best compliance people here at the show if you have questions. And thank you.
I'll echo the same. Thanks for the time today and the opportunity to chat. I think we're just getting started, right? We've all seen the immense benefit that technology has brought into our personal lives and into our lives outside of this industry specifically. There's a lot more to come. So we're working through the basics, and the way that we do that is we work through it together. We have to learn from you. And it's one of the reasons that I spend time at events like GATS to come meet you individually, look you in the eye, understand where you're coming from, understand the complexities of your operations, so that we can come back and we can build a better product for you. So please communicate with us, right? Every app that we put out, every dashboard page that we have has a feedback button on it, and we read every single one of those things. So please, as you see things that you think that we could do better, or that you think the industry can do better, let's have that conversation so that we can make that happen for you. Because at the end of the day, it's about improving your operations.
Yeah, so I'm the last one, I guess. So thanks everyone for coming here, spending some time with us. We also started the similar way. Our goal was to successfully help run your trucking authority, and ELD is one of the products which we offer apart from other suites of products. So we really focus on the drivers and the company owners, small companies, how we can protect them. And to others' point, like data privacy is core to our product, and we really take it seriously. We have more than 20,000 drivers on the road, so we have learned a few things over time. And please remember that you're not the only one. ELD is coming 2019, so officers also face the same problem. As long as you work really well with them, things go smoothly. And sorry, I guess we had only 2 tablets to give away, but we are at booth 4224. We have some cool swags. Please stop by. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you. I forgot to thank Tapan for the giveaways. So thanks for providing those for the good questions we had. Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panelists, and thank you for coming, and we hope you the best on your ELD journey.